Greetings, my children and new subscribers. Welcome to the TheMentok channel. I guess I can't call you guys children anymore because the government seems to be cracking down on YouTube channels now.
We have a variety of tools at our disposal to cull through those 23 million channels and in an expeditious way.
Just when I made this money, YouTube and the government want to come at me on both sides. Come on, guys. I made $3 this month. This is ridiculous. YouTube, government, you can't stop me. So now that I'm referring to you guys as children, I gotta find a name to change to. I'm not trying to have a government agent look at this and say, oh, well, he said this wasn't for kids. He's clearly talking to children. Just take a look at the demographics. The demographics say otherwise. But I'm way off topic. If you want to hear more about that COPPA stuff that's going on and what I'm referring to, check out the card I'm gonna put up. There's a pretty informative video on that if you're a YouTube creator. I don't know if people are overreacting yet or this is something we actually have to worry about. Either way, it's good to keep up with this stuff. Your favorite channels may be affected by this. I actually wanted to talk about more Sonic related stuff today. Go figure, right? So earlier this week, some pretty big Sonic news dropped, and I'm not talking about the redesign. I already did a reaction to that, so take a look at that video if you're interested in that. There was another interesting set of news that dropped for the Sonic community, and this is more so for the old school fans who are into the behind the scenes action of development for the early titles. More specifically in this case, Sonic 3. So the development of Sonic 3 is a very interesting story, and Sega was such a larger corporation and more impactful on the video game community than they are now. Not that they aren't a big corporation now, but they tend to be more low-key than they were then. Hidden Palace and the Cutting Room Floor both released news that a prototype for Sonic 3 was discovered. And in this prototype is some significant differences between the final copy of Sonic 3 and what was initially on that prototype. Older sprites, missing songs, levels that were eventually cut and put into Sonic and Knuckles. Everything seems to just fit the story perfectly that we've been hearing about for years. And if you haven't read this article already or this piece of this blog on hiddenpalace.org, please check it out. I'm going to link it in the description below, because if you're interested in how development worked back in the day, this is a pretty all-encompassing piece on what went down for Sonic 3, and you realize how strict Sega was about press releases, etc. back in the day. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of what we know so far, and what I know so far before this prototype was released. So, Sonic 3 had a very troubled development, and it was initially planned to be a much bigger game than it actually was. So we got this game split into two parts. One was Sonic 3, the other was Sonic and Knuckles. Now on one side, it was initially going to be called Sonic 3 Part 1, and then Sonic 3 Part 2 eventually released after the fact. So Sega was pretty much keeping everything under wraps. Journalists could barely report on this because things were so troubled. Development was struggling to get through. This was initially going to be a 3D isometric game, then they had to scrap that idea entirely and then work with Sonic the Hedgehog 2 asset to start up a brand new sequel from scratch. This put a lot of pressure on Sega, I'm sure, because they were dealing with some internal battles at the time between the American team and the Japanese team, and that's a whole nother story that maybe I can cover in another video if people are interested in that kind of thing. But essentially there was civil war going on in Sega between their Japanese offices and their American offices, and this caused a lot of friction amongst the teams and was a big factor in leading to their downfall to a much smaller company that had to jump out of the hardware industry. All this aside from what we know, Sonic was their flagship title and it needed to be big. They had a lot of riding on this game, including a tie-in with McDonald's merchandise at the time. And I don't know, McDonald's seemed bigger at the time.
Do you believe in magic? What is this? And I hope you do. Oops, too slow.
McDonald's was huge in the 90s. That Happy Meals and toys and playpens, I don't know. Anywho, so Sega and McDonald's apparently had this huge deal where Sonic the Hedgehog 3 needed to be released by early 1994, and they could not go back on that contract. Apparently, based on what we know from this prototype, these developers went through crunch time. Apparently, from July 1993 to the actual release date in February 1994. Did I get that right? Let me confirm this real quick. Correct. February 1994. So that was the obligation they had to fulfill for that McDonald's deal. Based on what we know, it looks like huge parts of this game was scrapped or had to be redone or were just basically incomplete up until July 1993. So essentially you saw a team of developers that had to knock out a game in less than 6 months. That is crazy. That is nuts. And that is one hell of a crunch time that we're not hearing about. Sega tends to be very hush-hush behind the development of Sonic the Hedgehog, and I've been following along with this story for like about 10 years now, and when it comes to the music, to development, it just seems like everybody is still on their NDA for whatever reason. There's just barely little facts that trickle in, and people on the Japanese development team tend to be very vague with their details. Let's start with the music. So as you can see throughout the prototype, the levels are pretty much set up the same. There's a lot of textural differences. The biggest rumor and practically confirmed theory is that Michael Jackson and his team worked on pieces of that soundtrack. And for those who don't know, certain tracks in Sonic 3 sound very much like what Michael Jackson was putting out at the time. Very poppy, voice samples in the background. We've been theorizing this for a long time, and it's more or less confirmed. A couple of Michael Jackson's producers are actually credited in the credits for Sonic 3. And it's mainly because of this that a lot of re-releases of Sonic 3 have run into snags. And I'm pretty sure this is the major reason we haven't seen a huge re-release on iOS and Android for Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles. So in this prototype, we actually hear different tracks in the specific stages where that MJ music was supposed to be. And the main two tracks in question here are Carnival Night Zone and Ice Cap Zone. Interestingly enough, in those MJ levels, we hear old prototypes of songs that were supposed to be there before they got involved. Now, what's interesting about that is those melodies were eventually used for the PC release of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. And I believe that those tracks were scrapped to avoid legal issues or copyright issues later on down the line. As for the rest of the prototypes, hackers are now getting into the code and they're like really playing it right now. And you can find this video on YouTube. It's an hour and 30 minutes of playthrough. Very glitchy. But there are two major things that I've noticed here. All the sprites of the characters are completely different. Sonic looks like he did in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and Knuckles has a completely different sprite here that would look like it fit in Sonic 2. So it looks like they redid those sprites completely, and there are a few animations that are involved here that are actually pretty cool and weren't included in the final product. Namely, when Sonic hangs on to Tails and starts flying, there's a cool little animation for that, as well as a few other things that I feel like were placeholders for Knuckles. For instance, when the Chaos Emeralds are knocked out at the beginning, here Knuckles kind of just stands there and puts his hand up like he's a little bit more chill. Another interesting thing that people are discovering and theorizing is the drop dash. For those who haven't played Sonic Mania, there is a new power that's given to Sonic called the drop dash. So once you land in a jump, you can hold down the jump button to kind of skid forward a little bit to keep up that momentum that he has. It's a function that people never believed that they needed until they actually played the game and they realized, oh, this is actually pretty dope. Funny enough, there's a bunch of clips located in this prototype or the video of the prototype where Sonic is seen using that drop dash. And people were wondering if this was just a coincidence or if this was actually pulled by Christian Whitehead, who was the lead developer in Sonic Mania, and added as a feature in that specific game. Right now he's saying that it's just a mere coincidence, and a lot of people aren't sure if this was actually intended or if this is just part of the glitchiness of this prototype. If you read further on that Hidden Palace article, you'll find not only one gaming magazine at the time had this much access to this much information on what was going on behind closed doors. Sega was a much more powerful group at this time, and they wanted everyone to make sure that the press did not get wind that development was a complete mess. And it is crazy, based on all this information that's coming out, that Sonic 3 was a legendary game with so much success. I mean, if anyone told me this story without mentioning that it was a Sonic game, I would assume that it was a flopped release of the game. This sounds like the story behind Anthem, but very much so it seemed like the studio was in chaos trying to get this game out. But the reason I'm covering this is because it's so interesting, but it's the fact that it's such big news is because no one ever thought that they would get their hands on a prototype. It kind of baffles me that no journalists got really nosy about what was going on, especially how big Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was, and they just took Sega's word for it that it was going great. But hey, we got a hell of a game out of that. And so now people are picking apart this prototype to see what else they can dig up and what else they can find. Again, if you have not seen that article, go ahead and check it out, as well as that YouTube video. You'll find some pretty interesting knickknacks. Once again, I want to welcome all my new subscribers. Every so often, I'll do some Sonic content. The last few weeks have been pretty consistently Sonic. There's some big news in the community coming out. But aside from that, right now I'm gonna do Comment of the Week. Comment of the Week has been missing for quite some time, but this is a segment where I choose one comment in my last video to present and read to you guys. This week's Comment of the Week is from Kenny Lauderdale. Ah, yes, it's Kenny, son. If you're not subscribed to Kenny, check out his channel. He covers a bunch of old animes and reviews them from top to bottom. And Kenny has been a big supporter of the channel, and I've never given him Comment of the Week, so I think this week is the week to do it. So Kenny's saying, "You're not showing up on my feed, and I never got the notification." This I'm trying to square away with YouTube. They're surprisingly responsive. Thankfully, I'm one of those weirdos that manually checks up on channels I like, otherwise I wouldn't be watching this. Onto the video. Sonic's always been cringe. This is perfectly normal. Sonic Underground alone is physically painful to watch, so anything better than that is a step up. Keep up the good work, man. Did you just hit 8,000? Yeah, damn right I did. 8,000 plus subscribers now. We've reached another level. We've reached another plateau, so thank you, Kenny. You're one of my main subscribers that I feel is just loyal to the channel, and I appreciate all your support. And to my brand new subscribers, please leave some comments below. You never know, the following week, you too could be a winner of Comment of the Week. Aside from that, guys, thank you for supporting this channel. It has just blown up into something much bigger than I ever thought it would. Also, totally unpaid endorsement. Check out Hybrid Shop. I'm putting a link below. Some pretty badass shirts there. And I might check if they will release some merch for me very soon. So anyway, my children, that will do it for another week. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative. And as always, be safe. The Prophet has spoken.